What's up, everybody? How's it going? I hope you're all doing well. I just thought I'd do a quick video about something I was thinking about. It's quite hard to explain in terms of concept. It's quite a straightforward concept if you really break it down, but at first it can be a bit difficult. And then I'm going to give some examples of what I mean by that. And the examples might seem a bit silly, but at some point in your life you're going to be able to relate to them. So it might not be that relevant now, but at some point it definitely will. And if you think about the concept, it's definitely relevant for sure. So the concept I really wanted to talk about today was how some things in life, they're kind of like a cycle. And if you've ever studied biology, there's something called like negative feedback, where basically things like your body temperature, for example, it's kept at a certain level that fluctuates within a certain limit, basically. So if you get too hot, you sweat, you cool down. If you get too cold, you start shivering, you warm up, and then the process kind of repeats to keep your body within a certain period. But there's also something called positive feedback, which is a bit more difficult to explain, but it's essentially where one thing kind of activates another thing, and then it's like a cycle dependent on each other. So something will keep amplifying, or something will keep getting worse and worse. So examples of that are, in biology, I'm just giving quick examples before we get on to how this applies in life actually, is, clotting. So one little platelet will activate another, and then you have like a clotting cascade, because a huge number, one will activate another, and then, so it's like 1, then 2, then 4, then, it's like that. So it's like a huge positive exponential feedback cycle. And so, yeah, actually, I was thinking of how actually that can actually happen into our lives, and how in some ways that can be good in terms of, that explains a lot of things that we think about, like the law of attraction, or how, people who meditate, they talk about manifestation, why that actually might work. I'm going to get into that. And then I'm actually going to talk about actually areas where the opposite is true. So bad things can then spiral very, very, very quickly into other things, and things to just watch out for, basically. So the examples that I'm going to talk about in terms of things that can negatively, we call it positive feedback because that's the mechanism in terms of things being amplified, but in this context it's a negative effect on your life. So the two examples I was going to talk about were credit scores, which sounds a bit silly, and actually deconditioning, which is something I think is a really big problem across the world, but particularly in the developed world at the moment, especially with the pandemic. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was your credit score. So if you've never heard about your credit score, you don't need to search it. It's important to know about later in life, but the system behind it basically means that if you have a higher credit score, you're more likely to get approved for sort of deals and credit cards and things that have like a better like interest rate and a better they have better perks, right? So essentially, if you have a good credit score, you'll always be able to get favorable loans, or like things from the banks, and favorable cards, and so you'll be able to pay them back more easily or maintain things, and your credit score will just keep going up, right? Which is a good thing. But at the same time, that's also true negatively. If you have a bad credit score, no one wants to lend to you. But counterintuitively, the best way to build your credit score, obviously if it's bad, you have to pay off all the debts and stuff, but then actually you would at some point need to borrow some money, pay it back, or take out a credit card and pay it back to build your score. And so, this is the thing I was going to talk about, was how actually, we do kind of, it explains a lot in life. We see the rich, they keep getting richer, and we see the poor keep getting poorer. It's because of these systems of ours and how they work on this positive feedback mechanism. People who are rich are able to, they have good credit scores, they have access to higher financial institutions, and they're able to make money on their money, so their wealth keeps growing. And people who are poor, just to see what I mean, it's very difficult for one person to break through this cycle. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's why I think it's really important to understand this concept of positive feedback cycles and how actually it can govern our lives. And so, like I was saying, there can be like subconscious ways that people talk about like manifesting things that they've been thinking about, or they go after one thing and then other things come, and the law of attraction. But as you can see, a lot that's kind of like a spiritual subconscious side to it. But from a practical standpoint, a lot of the systems that govern our financial system, or even our physiological body system, which I'm going to talk about in terms of deconditioning in a bit, they're actually based off the positive feedback cycle. And so it is really difficult for someone to break free of those things. It can be done, but all I'm saying is it takes planning, and the only way you're going to be able to plan to get out of these things is if you're aware of these things, which is why I thought it's important to talk about this aspect of life in this video actually. So yeah, that's one thing. So we talked about the credit score basically and how it's difficult to break out, but in terms of actually Something else I wanted to talk about, which is quite difficult for people to deal with, is deconditioning. So what actually is deconditioning? So it basically means that, in a simple way of explaining it, it's where your body loses its ability to do what it normally does, and that can happen in diseases, but also it can just happen due to inactivity. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone was, I'll give you two examples. Okay, so let's say somebody was they work 24 hours a day. They might never do that, but just think about it like this. Or let's say they work 18 hours a day, sleep 6 hours, and then they suffer an injury or an illness, and now they kind of can't work as long. So that would be a form of deconditioning. Let's say they had like a chronic lung disease and they get tired now. So that is a form of deconditioning, because they're not able to do what they used to do. So that's kind of the context that most people hear it in, is this context of disease or illness. But here's the other context where I think it applies more broadly in our day-to-day lives, and that's actually inactivity. So the greatest example to see this in is people who used to be very active, or like go to the gym, or just anything like that before the pandemic. Okay, so if you assess their ability in terms of like their strength or their fitness, before the pandemic and then during the pandemic, like 3, 4, 9 months after they've been inactive, you're going to see they've lost a lot of their strength, or they've lost a lot of their conditioning. And it's true, I'm not going to get into the fitness side of things. You can maintain your muscle with small amounts of volume, or smaller amounts of intensity, but higher amounts of volume. And there are a couple of people who did actually maintain their physiques quite well over lockdown. But my point is that deconditioning is something that occurs in our lives as well due to inactivity. And this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm just giving you that example because I want you to understand that it's the same process, that positive feedback, which is negatively impacting you. The less activity you do, the less you're going to be able to do, because your body physiologically, it will only adapt to the demands it's given. You have all these people who want to build muscle, and they're going to the gym, they're lifting a huge amount of weight in maybe 5-10 minutes, and that's great. And then the rest of their session they're resting, and then when they go home they're eating junk food and they're sleeping. So their body isn't really under a lot of stress, so it's not really gonna think, let me wake up, let me actually build the muscle now. And I'm not gonna get into too much of the fitness side of things, but my point is your body is adapting to what it needs to do. And so from that point of view, the less you do, the less your body is going to be able to do. And this is a really difficult concept to actually wrap your head around, because it's actually quite counterintuitive. Like I was saying, if you wanted to build your credit score, you would at some point, after paying back, doing the initial stuff like paying back your debts and stuff, you would at some point have to take another loan or a credit card in order to build your score. And it's the same case. If you're deconditioned, if you're struggling to exercise, or you're struggling to walk up a hill for whatever reason, illness, or just deconditioning from a lack of activity, at some point you're actually going to have to start being active. And that's quite counterintuitive when you think about it, because when people are ill, we tell them you need bed rest. And it's true. Like, let's say someone has the flu, they do need to rest for quite some time to get over their symptoms, maybe 10 to 14 days. But as soon as those active signs of infection have gone down, like the temperature and maybe a cough or something, then actually we should be trying to get them to start moving again. And this is something that's really difficult to explain in healthcare, because it sounds so stupid. Like, imagine telling a patient with chronic lung disease, I need you to exercise. They're saying, I'm trying to exercise and I can't exercise, that's why I've come to you, idiot. Why don't you understand? And it's really difficult, and I feel like because it's so hard to explain, we really struggle to explain it to patients, and they really struggle to understand it because we haven't really done a good job of explaining it. And therefore, because we didn't take that initial time to go through this concept with them, they'll never be able to understand why they need to do these things. And so because of that, they'll keep coming back with the same problems. And that's why I think it's a really big issue that's facing us at the moment. So this is what I'm saying. You need to be able to identify in your life when something is governed by a positive feedback cycle. So whether that's credit score, whether that's your activity level, whether that's your mood, because that's very common. One bad thing can lead to can sort of tip you over if you've got underlying issues and lead to a mental health crisis. This actually, when you understand this positive feedback cycle, you can see that it really does govern a lot of impacts in our lives. And so this is why I'm trying to say that we need to understand it so that we can identify it and we can take corrective steps towards it. And they do seem counterintuitive at first, and that's why I think it's really important to understand. So I hope I did my best in trying to explain this concept of positive feedback cycles and how actually sometimes you have to take counterintuitive steps to beat them. But I hope, even if it hasn't quite got through to you, that it's at least got you to start thinking about these concepts and how you can identify them in your life and what you can do about them. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and actually just smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, because we need to make these like nightly vlogs. We need to take them off. We need to get the discussions going so people can at least start to identify, you know, the problems of today, and they can start talking about them, because that's really how things get solved, is when people start working together. So yeah, like, comment, share, subscribe, share this with anyone if it helped you, and don't forget to check out the links in the description below. So take care, people. Peace out.